All right, everybody, if I can ask everyone to come to their seats and turn their cell phones on silent, we will start the August 30th meeting. Supervisor Cortese contacted me earlier today. He's got a personal matter going and will be here as soon as he can. We currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need 6 for a quorum. So we're going to go through those items that do not require a quorum, non-action items, such as receiving reports, things like that. And then when Supervisor Cortese or any other member arrives, we'll have our quorum and we'll go from there. So we'll start with call to order and do roll call. Peggy, can you start us off? Go ahead and call roll. Or we can we'll make it easier for you. Aaron, if you'll announce yourself, your name, and then...
Here. Kevin O'Day.
Alex Kennett, physically here.
Mike Wasserman. Bill Chiara.
Laurel Pervetti.
Elizabeth Pianca, Office of the County Council.
Wonderful, and now we do have a quorum, so we'll continue forward. Item number 2 on the agenda is public comment, where anyone can comment about anything they wish that's not on tonight's agenda. I think I've got one speaker card here. I do. Sherry Kennedy. What item here? Agenda item. Sherry, I can't tell from this what item you want to speak on.
7.93092, Agricultural Resilience Incentive Program. Grant program.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to wait till we get to item number 7, and we'll call you up at that time. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak about anything not on today's agenda? How you feel about the assessor? Anything at all? Boo! Okay, good. Thank you. Go Giants, Larry. All right. Item 3 will be stakeholder comments. Any stakeholders have any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is to approve the consent calendar, which now includes all of item number 8. So I've got a motion to approve. Remember to turn on your microphones, please, to the right of your screen. The middle button will say mic, M-I-C. You'll press that.
Move to approve.
Thank you. And we have a second. I don't have any speaker cards on item 8, so I take it no one from the audience objects to anything with the minutes from our June 28th meeting. Any comments? Seeing none. All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. We now move on to item number 5, which is considering recommendations from the Department of Planning and Development relating to the Farmland Security Zone Program. Mr. Eastwood.
Hey, good evening. Supervisor Wasserman and your assistant, I don't believe was introduced, but...
Babe Ruth here.
Okay.
Mom needed something about Babe Ruth, so I'm bringing this home to Mom.
Got it. So as just a couple introductory remarks, I'm going to give it over to Charu in her office. She's going to walk you through the Farmland Security Zone. Tonight is a pretty light agenda, and so just sort of recognizing that, we just have 2 items before you. One thing just up front for the task force, you'll see this agenda and the agendas going forward. Our intent when these items come forward and you discuss them, if we think they're actionable, which means there's a program, policy, or action that could come out of it that you could recommend to the board, our intent is that the task force move those forward. I know when there is task force, sometimes there's different philosophies that you wait till the end, but how we've set up this task force, and I think in the first meeting we structured it is if we see programs that you can move forward today, the administration is recommending that you do so.
Thank you. And committee members, you should all have the first PowerPoint slide, Farmland Security Zone Program, on your screen. If you don't, again, on the 3 buttons to the right of your screen where it says input, you'd press it so the light is not on. If you have Farmland Security Zone Program, you don't need to do anything but sit back and enjoy.
Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Charu to give you a nice walkthrough of the Farmland Security Zone.
Your microphone, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Good evening to all the AG Task Force members. So I'll be going through this Farmland Security Zone Program. To start with, in the presentation, we'll just do an introduction and overview to get everyone familiar with the tool and go into how the program can be set up in the county, further to county physical considerations and conclusions with staff recommendations. So to give a bit of context and to begin, in the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan, the Farmland Security Zone Program was introduced as an action item under the focus area, which is highlighted in that red circle. So this focus area included the voluntary financial incentives, and Farmland Security Zone is one such incentive. So there are 3 programs in this bucket. The first we've been discussing over the previous 2 meetings, which is the ACE program, or the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. Today we talk about the Farmland Security Zone and a third program, which is the RE, that Michael will be talking about, which stands for the Agricultural Resilience Incentive Program. So just some basics. So what is a Farmland Security Zone? So it is a voluntary financial incentive, and the Senate bill that defined and allowed for the creation of the Farmland Security Zone was approved in 1998. So this is similar to the Williamson Act program. But what it does is that it provides for enhanced reduction in tax in exchange for keeping the land in commercial ag production for a longer period of time. So it's also called the Super Williamson Act program. Just comparisons of the existing Williamson Act program that is currently adopted by the county and the proposed Farmland Security Zone program. So both of these are voluntary contracts, and requirement to qualify is there should be existing commercial agricultural operation in the property, and that the subject property should be located within an established agricultural preserve. So this is a requirement of the WA program, that local jurisdictions adopt an agricultural preserve, and within that, the jurisdiction can consider the contracts that are recommended by the landowners. So because FSZ is also an extended WA contract type program, so the same ag preserve requirements apply to it. In terms of differences, the FSZ contract term is twice as long as the Williamson Act contract. So while the Williamson Act contract needs to be is a 10-year term, which gets renewed on a rolling basis, the FSZ contract term is a minimum 20 years. And when we come to property tax assessment for the Williamson Act contracts, it's based on the agricultural value, that is the income producing value of land and not the market value. And for FSZ, a 35% reduction off of the Williamson Act tax rate is proposed.
Thank you. And if I may, for just a minute, committee members, Williamson Act on steroids, Super Williamson Act, whatever you want to call this, what this is simply is if you commit to minimum 20 years versus 10, to take another 35% off the Williamson Act tax rate is what it is. The one question I have for you about this item, when I first got here, the Williamson Act existed and the state made up the difference to the county. A couple years after my being here, the state decided, oh, we don't want to do this much anymore. And I remember making the motion on behalf of the farmers for the county to basically supplement the difference, the loss in revenue, so we could continue the Williamson Act here in Santa Clara County. I was very proud of that. Supervisor Cortese joined me in that as well. This additional 35%, and Rob, I'll direct this to you and whoever among staff's appropriate, this additional 35% reduction, is the state going to help out on that, or is that going to fall on the county too?
It would be the county's obligation.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you also for doing this chart this way. We all received, this information, and that chart's very visually able to see what the Williamson Act is, and all of these individuals here, believe me, know what the Williamson Act is. And then the column over there showing what the differences are is very, very easy to understand. So thank you for whoever prepared this report.
So moving on, just again a comparison of the eligibility standards. So in case of the Farmland Security Zone requirements for the agricultural soil are more restrictive. So while for Williamson Ag contracts, all types of ag soils are permitted to go under contract. But for FSZ, only soils designated as predominantly either prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmlands, and farmlands of local importance are permitted to go under contract. Location-wise, they both need to be in an existing ag preserve, and a minimum parcel size requirements is the same for both. That's 10 acres of prime land or 40 acres of non-prime land. The one additional restriction that the FSZ contracts have is that if the subject property is within a city's sphere of influence, then they require a resolution of support by the city to enroll the property in contract. So the process of establishing a farmland security zone contract is quite similar to the Williamson Act. So the land needs to be within an ag preserve. It does get approved by the Board of Supervisors, and it is initiated based on a request by a landowner. So what we see up here, the map here is a countywide map of all the existing agricultural preserves that have been adopted by the county, and this map was adopted in May 2006. So we already have these ag preserves in the county. Now, within the ag preserves, we have farmland that's under Williamson Ag contract and other farmland which is not under Williamson Ag contract. And both of these types are permitted to enroll in farmland security zones. So going further, when we look at it in context of the Santa Clara Valley, the program that we're proposing would have a countywide focus in essentially the ARA, or the agri-source area, which has all the prime important farmland soils on the valley floor. That would be the focus area. The blue parcels indicate lands which are currently under the Williamson Ag contract with the eligible soils for enrollment in the FSZ contracts, and the yellow parcels are not under the Williamson Ag contract. So for the blue parcels, that's 288 parcels, about 7,000 acres. And for the yellow parcels, which is, the acreage is about 13,500 acres and 58 parcels. So, I mean, it's likely that parcels that are currently already under the Williamson Act would go forward and enroll in the farmland security zone. So we did some preliminary calculations. So assuming that all of these 288 parcels were to get converted or were to enroll in the farmland security zone program, we see an anticipated annual loss of $130,000, right? And compared to the annual county property tax revenue, which is $979 million, the loss of revenue is just 0.01%. So that's based on calculations that we did with the help of the assessor's office. And so there were some other examples that we looked at and that had an existing farmland security zone program. So there's Marin, Sonoma, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and the other counties on the screen. So the main important lesson learned here was that a lot of the counties, the enrollment in the farmland security zone program was low, primarily owing to the fact that farmers and landowners were not aware of the benefits of the program. So important learning was educational workshops and outreach to share information about the program. And the other thing that we learned was that a lot of counties have encouraged or have put forward supplemental rules to increase this participation. So in a sense, for instance, in Santa Barbara, they've included non-prime grazing lands that are located within a 2-mile radius of an urban growth boundary as eligible for farmland zone security zone contracts. So we did see a lot of flexibility and additional rules that are introduced at the local level to operate this program. So yeah, in conclusion, staff would like to receive feedback from the task force members today on the program, and also feedback on how we can set eligibility standards, whether we should limit the program only to farmland security, to prime farmland soils, or also include non-prime prime farmland soils within the ARA.
Thank you very much for your report. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Committee members, for me, this is kind of a no-brainer. It's entirely optional and voluntary for landowners, farm owners to participate or not. If you're in the Williamson Act now, you have 10-year obligations. If you want to bump that up to 20 and save 35% more on your taxes, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Rob, I believe you're giving a report to the Farm Bureau itself in another week or two?
We will be meeting with the Farm Bureau on Tuesday. We can definitely elicit their feedback also.
Okay, so next week, interested in Farm Bureau's response to this. But this is kind of one of those things, if you want to participate and lock things up for 20 years, you save more money. If you don't want to, you don't have to. The county's making up the difference. Again, the state bailed on this program, but the county is there to make up the difference. You've got possible actions here. A is to receive the report. We don't need a vote on that, so we'll consider the report received. But item B is the one that staff's looking for direction from committee members. I don't have any speaker cards on this. Anyone here wish to speak on this item? No, I'll turn to committee members. Yep, Aaron, we'll start with you. And you saw, if you can leave that last slide up on the screen, please, the last item in your PowerPoint presentation. That'll be great. And committee members, you're looking at package page 4. Item B is in Baker. Forwarding recommendations, I think that'll be easy to do. And then if you have any other suggestions, the second bullet on staff's presentation says feedback on setting eligibility requirements, limiting program to only prime farmlands. Comment, we'll start out. Aaron.
Just a question, Aaron Gill with for staff and so forth. It seems like in Coyote Valley there's not a lot of people taking advantage of the Williamson Act as it stands right now, and I'm wondering what the incentive would be there to go ahead and reach out to these folks, and what would be the best position to take to say that this program is available and actually get their participation.
Yeah, not really part of the recommendation today, but I think as Charo mentioned, I think just a lot of landowners don't know these programs exist. So I think part of administration's follow through, should the board move forward, or the task force and board move forward with this, is start an education program. And I agree with Committee Member Gill that Coyote Valley is pretty much a target-rich area where if property owners are willing and they know the program, it'd be a great place to try and get some properties enrolled.
Yep, super. An education program was part of your outreach and
That's correct.
that you included. Sure. Anybody else? Nope. Are we good? Yes, Kevin?
I, for one, would be interested in seeing the Super Williamson extended to include non-prime land within the ARA. I think it's important at this stage of the program that there be some early wins. We've talked about that before, and I think for some of the non-prime lands would be more likely to enroll and could be some of those early wins. So I would certainly support extending it to include non-prime lands within the ARA.
Thank you. And I know they're taking notes with your comments. Julie, did you have a comment?
I did. I just wanted to ask, I know under the Williamson Act, in the county, when we did the guidelines, from what I understand, we were allowed, well, you could aggregate parcels in order to meet the minimum acreage. Are we thinking of the same thing here, applying that same guideline?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I assume if we do it with the Williamson Act, we could also do it with the Farmland Security Zone.
Okay, and just for clarification, when we're talking about prime farmland soils, we're talking about statewide, so we're just sort of separating that out from grazing.
There's, I think, 4 categories there.
So we're separating that out from grazing, and that's where the non-prime comes in.
That's correct. Again, the board could, based on task force recommendation, extend it out to grazing lands, but at the core of the program is only those soil types that you broadly defined as prime.
Okay, and then one last question. It's just really procedural. So, what would sort of be the anticipated timeline to prepare this and then get it adopted and then get to the guidelines?
If the task force makes a recommendation, I think we'd like to go to the board in September. The board agrees, directs administration. We'd draft the ordinances, guidelines that go with it, probably 4 to 5 months. I hope we'd have something adopted by spring of next year, and we'd start some education outreach and hopefully get some people enrolled after that.
All right, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Laurel.
Thank you. I'm prepared to make a motion to essentially capture all the comments of the task force members and recommend that we move this forward to ordinance preparation and guideline preparation. I think the comments made about including non-prime farmland should be explored, as well as looking at the other agricultural preserves within the county, so that this is a county-wide program and not limited just to the agricultural area that we've been focusing on. And then the comment about the role of urban growth boundaries that other jurisdictions have looked at, if you could explore that a little bit more, particularly as it relates to the sphere of influence and the need to coordinate with cities in terms of resolutions. I think we need to do some outreach to our neighbors to make sure that the cities are on board and understand and can help with this program. So that's my motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Alex, second? Thank you. Any other further comment? I'll just make one just for the record. This is just one more instance where the state lets me down. We made up the difference for the Williamson Act. Now we're going to make up the difference for the Super Williamson Act. It's simply the county putting money where its mouth is, saying that agriculture is important to us, and incentivizing farmers, ranchers, whomever it might be, to maintain that use of their land in return for a monetary benefit. But I think it's important, and I'd ask the Farm Bureau members to share with their members, to understand this is simply the county paying for this money. It used to be the state reimbursing what you paid the county, and the state bailed out about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was on the regular Williamson Act, and this will be the county doing this. And I'm proud of the county's involvement. I'm disappointed in the state's non-involvement. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. That passed unanimously. Thanks again for your report, capturing the comments made before Member Pravetti's motion, as well as the ones that she made. That concludes item number 5 on our agenda. 6, we did not have any papers in our report. It says to receive a report from the Ag Preservation Task Force Ad Hoc Subcommittee.
I just wanted to ask if you wanted to, I know we got folks here on item number 7, if you wanted to take that first, and we could do the...
We can jump to 7, and then we can sit back for a 2 or 3 hour report from the task force, is what you're... Okay, no.
Yes.
Okay, let's jump on to 7 per staff's recommendations, which is to consider recommendations from the Department of Planning and Development relating to financial incentives for ecosystem services and the creation of an agricultural resilience incentive. Just what I need, one more acronym.
Right, so
An
we'd start...
ARI program.
Yes. Today there's a quiz later from FSZ to ARI.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Rob, if you don't mind, I've got a speaker card on this from Sherry Kennedy. Oh, it's Kennedy. I'm sorry. I didn't see that as an N. Sherry, come on forward, please. You'll have a couple of minutes to speak on this item. Anybody else wishing? We're on item 7 for those of you following here and at home. We skipped over 6, which we'll come back to. Welcome.
Hi.
You can go right to the podium here. There's a microphone built in.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, I'm Sherry Kennedy. I'm owner-operator of Sherry's Farm in Gilroy. And the reason I'm here to speak is on your agenda packet that you have on this report, I particularly want to address number 6 on page 2, and that how might the county structure administration of this ARI. Now, many of the programs that are grant programs, like Scout, they are not retroactive. I know that from firsthand, and it's said in your packet, from firsthand experience. I know that after we took our ag well and put in all kinds of drip irrigation and metering and energy efficient motor, I applied for the grant and they said, why'd you do it beforehand? It's not retroactive. In other words, they're not rewarding you for forward thinking. So I'm looking, we have a pressure on us by the government, United States government. They want to reduce emission levels to 1990 by 2020. And by 2030, we have to be at 40% below that. And the big spewers of greenhouse gases are 25,000 meter tons of CO2 a year. And these are companies that are targeted for cap and trade. Now, my concern is how to facilitate, if this grant goes through, which I hope it does, what would be a criteria that farms or farmers or landowners should participate in? Well, first of all, there's a study done in September 2017 that was released by Northeastern University and the Organic Center, our farm, our little farm in Gilroy, was a participant in this. There were 659 organic samples from 39 states and 728 conventional samples from 48 the lower United States. And
Sherry, your time is up. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, let's add 1 more minute on there for Sherry to finish her thoughts.
44% of the levels from organic farming contain human components of soil that sequesters carbon, the long-term thing that we're all hoping for. It's a big carbon sink. Also, we're tier 1, and other farms are tier 1. What makes us tier 1 is because we monitor any kind of things that are not going into our major waterways. We're 1,000 feet away from the Yagas Creek. Also, our leases extend that you must stay organic, you must continue tier 1, and this tenant shall exercise minimal tillage. So what my concern is how to administer that when you get to it. These might be points that you wish to put in criteria if this grant, for locally for this grant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherry. Kennedy, gotcha. All right, seeing no other speakers, we'll close the public portion of that. We'll turn back to you, Rob, for staff report or comments.
Absolutely. So just 2 things to start. One is I did want to introduce Michael Meehan. I'm not sure if he was here last time. If you were on the mobile workshop, you met him. We're very happy we hired Michael as the Ag Program Manager. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of him. Came to us with a lot of farming and ag policy research. And as opposed to the last item, which has been in state law a bit easier to understand, we think this is a bit cutting edge. So anyways, with that, I want to thank Michael for getting deep into the research, coming out of it with what we think are some good recommendations on getting a pilot program going. But with that, wanted to hand it over to Michael and go from there.
Thank you, Rob. How do we get that? There we go. So this is a program that, as Charo charted out, is complementary to the ACE program and now also complementary to the FSZ program. And so for that reason, we have another acronym, the RE program. And we'll go into the nomenclature with that a little bit, why we're calling it this. But fundamentally, this can be seen as a complement to those programs in that it's a voluntary financial incentive for farmers. And also that this really is about the ecosystem benefits, whether it's carbon sequestration, as we just heard about, or the many other benefits that we'll see. I want to make clear that what we're proposing here today, what we're recommending, is the creation of a pilot program. So we think that there are legs to this, and we think it could be a long-standing companion to the ACE program, but what we're recommending is really kind of an exploratory one-time allocation for this pilot program. So again, this lands within the bucket of voluntary financial incentives, and this one really clearly gets at the very subtitle of the Ag Plan, to invest in our working lands for regional resilience. So this more specifically identify opportunities and create programs that provide financial compensation to farmers, providing ecosystem benefits. So as that recommendation from the report, we have come to recommend this program. So first, I just want to cover what ecosystem services really means. And in this context, we're talking about the co-benefits of agriculture. And so that includes all the items listed there on the screen. And importantly, it includes benefits that come from agriculture being preserved, from reducing sprawl, from reducing traffic, from the very nature of agriculture continuing instead of development. And then there's another component, which is really about the practices used and on the shorter term, the management of that property. And so if the ACE program, which itself is replicating state and federal programs, is about preserving the land, what we're talking about here are the practices and the management of that land. So why is it called the resilience incentive? Well, we've talked a lot about payment for ecosystem services, and in the world that I come from, of a bunch of ag policy wonks, payment for ecosystem services connotes a certain market mechanism. And so if you look at the YOLO bypass, there is rice farming going on there that receives carbon offsets by participating in a marketplace. And they're essentially in a global system where the farmers are making the upfront investment in creating a system that sequesters carbon, and then payment is based on the verification of those outcomes. So it's really a payment for the service. What we're talking about and what there's a lot more precedent for, what's a lot easier to stand up, is really a cost share grant program. So we're talking about reimbursing farmers for the development of these practices and infrastructure. And like the Williamson Act, we're talking about a contract, although much shorter term, from 1 year to 5 years, that carry along with it, with the payment, the guarantee that the infrastructure will be maintained and that the practices will be continued. So what am I talking about when I say practices and infrastructure? There is a very long laundry list of eligible practices that farmers can enroll in. Everything from cover crop, which you see being mowed on the left here in an orchard. Cover crop, for those who are unfamiliar, is essentially a seeding of various plant matter in orchards and in the off-season. And then you have water efficiency, water management, such as the drip system that we see a close-up on the right. Both of these require maintenance, and they're a combination of sort of infrastructural improvements as well as management practices used by the farmers. So whether it's infrastructure or whether it's a practice that's being used, there are a lot of models for these programs. At the federal level, we have the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We have a local office here in Hollister, and they administer the EQIP program. Here are a lot more acronyms for you, but feel free to forget them immediately if you'd like. The Conservation Stewardship Program is very similar. At the state level, we have the Healthy Soils Program, as well as the Sustainable Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program, or SWEEP. Both of these are really similar to what we're proposing in that they are cost shares. They're also similar in, at least the state program is similar in that it falls within the purview of resilience, and particularly as a strategy for addressing climate change. And lastly, I want to mention what we have as a local resource is the Resource Conservation Districts of California, or RCDs. We've got our two local representatives from our two local RCDs here, and they're available for any questions at the end. And I'll also let them speak a little bit about what they do. But they are the ideal local partners for implementing this program because they provide technical assistance, and they currently help to administer the existing programs that we're piggybacking on. So why would the county incentivize agricultural co-benefits? So there are a lot of local reasons, as you can see. The first one, local leverage. When we are showing local support in investing in these practices, we're increasing the chances of farmers becoming eligible for the federal and state programs. We're also potentially increasing our chances of being successful with the state under the SALC program. It's important to note that the SALC program, which we see as a companion to our own ACE program, is coming from the same program, the same umbrella, and the same greenhouse gas reduction fund that the state's Healthy Soils program and SWEEP are. So in the same way that we're offering a companion to ACE, these are mimicking the state programs as well. We have a lot of local partners, whether it's the County Ag Department, Cooperative Extension, the RCDs who I mentioned, the NRCS office in Hollister, which covers our county as well as the Open Space Authority. They have a lot of similar programs and a lot of resources in terms of staff and expertise in terms of administering this. We have local conditions that are different from the rest of California. Even if we have a state program and even if federal programs are tailored to regions, there's a lot to be said for creating a program that best meets the needs of our farmers, and we have the opportunity there in this program. And lastly, there's the more conceptual perspective that this is a matter of local resilience, and we're investing in working lands as a form of public infrastructure. So do we need another incentive program? Well, the funding for the federal and state programs are not stable and relatively limited. Currently, the Farm Bill negotiations are going on in Washington, D.C., and one of the main programs within our NRCS is on the chopping block if the House bill is approved. Similarly, the state programs are kind of at the whim of the legislature and the budget negotiations and have been irregular. The existing programs cannot meet the high demand to participate, meaning there are more farmers knocking on the door that want to participate in these programs than are available, than the money is available. farmers using conservation practices are ineligible for existing programs. This is exactly what we just heard about to a certain extent from Sherry, that if a farmer is already installing drip irrigation or already using cover crop, they are ineligible from participating in the federal programs. This is not a great way to set up an incentive program, and it has a chilling effect on those who want to be on the cutting edge and who want to adopt conservation practices early on. And lastly, on average, farmers participating in these programs are reimbursed, they're lucky if they're reimbursed for a majority of the cost. So something I want to make really clear here is that farmers aren't going to be making profits off of these programs. I think it would be great if we were living in a world where that was possible, to actually receive payment for the environmental benefits that they're providing, but what we're talking about is a reimbursement and a cost share of what's needed to implement these. So this is one of my favorite analogies, and I want to ask what farmers and volunteer firefighters have in common. So clearly they are both hardworking, and clearly they have long hours and sometimes unusual hours, but the point is that they are dedicated.
Should we ask a couple of farmers to answer this question first?
This could be a multiple choice game.
Yeah, I could see that. All right, thank you. Go ahead.
But the point that I want to focus on is that they are dedicated to community resilience. Now, fighting fires might be a more urgent affair, but given the real climate effects that we're experiencing and that we're likely to experience, and given the real benefits of retaining agriculture in a region to increase our resilience towards those climate effects, I would argue that they're both public stewards, if you will. More importantly, I want to focus on the volunteer part of volunteer fire departments, and I want to look at what the difference is. While certain areas choose to create career fire departments, and while they offer stipends occasionally, while certain fire departments will have their firefighters out in the street stopping traffic and asking for donations, one thing that they don't do is they don't ask the firefighters volunteering to pay for their own hoses and to pay for their own ladders. And that's essentially what we're arguing for in the case of this program. Farmers are voluntarily choosing to enact conservation practices, preserving water, sequestering soil in their carbon in their soil. And what we're asking is to reimburse them for the cost of the tools to implement it. They will still be volunteering their time, and they will still be acting as stewards, and this is merely a reimbursement measure for the tools to do so. So how would this be structured? Speaking again to Sherry's point, there are 3 target participant groups. One of them is those already implementing conservation practices. We want to make sure that they are captured in this program so that those who are on the cutting edge of adopting conservation practices are eligible to participate. We also want to ensure that farmers otherwise ineligible for the existing programs are able to participate in our program. I have become aware that there are some farmers that don't have bank accounts. And if you don't have a bank account, for example, you can't participate in this. So I'm not sure that this is a program element that we will land on, but it's worth exploring whether we can pay for the, let's say, the drip tape up front rather than reimbursing them or excluding them immediately because they don't have a bank account. Now, then there's also the farmers already applying to existing programs. In looking through the recent successful bids for the California programs, I saw that George Giala Farms was a participant in the SWEEP program, and they received a grant that funded roughly 50% of the cost of installing a water monitoring and remote sensing system. It would be great if when a farmer goes to apply for the state funding, they could also apply for this funding, and they could move from 50% cost share closer to being made whole. How would it be structured? Most of these programs focus really on soil health and water efficiency. Below there, you see listed a number of the practices that are used. Again, there's a very long menu for farmers to choose from, and it's really about choosing the right practice or the right infrastructure improvement suited for the land. But we would be focusing on those areas that are based in good science and that are well tested, namely the sequestration of carbon in soil and the increase of soil organic matter, as well as the improving of water delivery systems. What can be expected from the pilot? Well, as mentioned, the idea here is to really explore this space and to see what it looks like for the county to work with local partners in administering a program that piggybacks on the state and federal programs. No one else that we've been able to find has done anything like this, and so in that respect, we're asking for a $200,000 allocation that would be funding the pilot phase of this. Based on results from California's analogous program, we think that that amount would yield roughly 12 contracts with participating farmers. That could be multiple contracts with one farmer, but we would open it up to applications across Santa Clara Valley. We think that with that amount of money, again, these are very rough estimates, but based off of the results from implementing the state programs, that this amount of money in this pilot program could yield the equivalent of water savings of 2,000 acre-feet and 900 metric tons of CO2. So there are real benefits to the immediate goals that we have, even in a pilot program such as this. What are the next steps? Well, we are asking the task force to forward a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to create and fund this pilot program. Were that to be the case, we would convene our local partners to develop a memorandum of understanding and a sort of implementation structure. We would tailor the eligibility requirements with those partners who understand the technical assistance needs of our community and ensure that we're creating the best program, and then we would start soliciting applications. And to be clear, that in this pilot program, we're anticipating that the county would take a lead and that this would be a component of the ag plan, but that we would very much rely on our partners, whether it's the OSA or whether it's the RCDs, for implementation. And with that, I will open it up to any questions. I plowed through that.
Thank you. That was well done. We appreciate that.
I also want to just introduce the directors of our two resource conservation districts here, and I want to welcome them to give an overview of the RCDs as well as answer any questions if you are unfamiliar with those institutions.
Thank you.
Good evening, Stephanie Moreno, Executive Director for the Guadalupe Coyote Resource Conservation District. Our RCD, as many in the state of California, was formed in the after the Dust Bowl days, so we've been around since the 1940s. Originally, we were the Black Mountain and Evergreen Soil Conservation Services that merged into Guadalupe Coyote some time ago. During the last 4 years, we have been trying to regain our roots in the agricultural community. We've been working closely with NRCS, getting cooperative agreements to put money back into the ranching and farming community, primarily and initially through public education. We have a Ranchers Outreach Program. We have a Rural Roads Program, and we just have been informed that we're getting another grant in coordination with Loma Prieta RCD and San Benito RCD to do technical assistance back to agricultural producers. So we're very proud of the inroads that we've made in the last few years. We do have the capacity to do administration of grants and contracts. We have some ongoing with both federal and state governments. We also have experience at our RCD with Community Grant Program, where we've given out microgrants to various organizations within the county to further natural resource goals. So we are more than happy to talk about a partnership. We have in the past done much of our administration on in-kind basis. If our board agrees to do that in the event that this is approved, it would be additional leverage that you'd be able to bring to the table for the ranchers by not having that come out of program costs. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Is this on?
Yes.
So I'm Dina Iden. I am the Executive Director for Loma Prieta Resource Conservation District. Our district basically covers the southern part of Santa Clara County, which is Morgan Hill south of San Benito County line, and then our east and west county borders. We have a small tax base, and we also operate with grants and cooperative agreements. And the three programs that we have available right now that could pertain to this incentive plan is we just got a grant from the Water District to work with our Chinese growers in South Santa Clara County with their water needs and their reporting needs. We also have a cooperative agreement that we've had since 2013 from the Water District. We provide a free mobile irrigation lab where we provide irrigation evaluations with distribution uniformities to anybody, any grower in Santa Clara County that wants to take advantage of that. And we have applied for some funding through the Patagonia, which we should hear about in September, to actually complete a carbon farm plan on a rangeland property, which I think is in San Benito County. But that opens up the door to us to get the carbon farm planning process started in Santa Clara County, and we'll be able to provide that service to growers, ranchers in Santa Clara County.
Thank you, and welcome to both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does that conclude staff comments at this point?
It does.
Thank you very much. We have two possible actions on our agenda. A is to receive the report. I think we'll consider the report received. We now move on to B, and committee members, B is a request. Dr. Smith.
I just wanted to ask a question. It strikes me that this type of program might be able to be funded through the PACE program. You know, we usually think of PACE funding bonds as designed for providing special new energy, but actually the way the bill is written, it also provides for water conservation or energy savings. And essentially all of the projects you're talking about have some implication on energy savings or water conservation. And PACE bonds allow for a funding mechanism that is ongoing, so it would be better than, you know, a $200,000 one-time event. So I wonder if maybe, Rob, you could check with County Council and make sure that, well, see if it's a possibility.
Absolutely.
We have Elizabeth here, so
sounds like
she'll be on it.
Sounds like a more sustainable funding source, and if we can connect those dots, it's something we absolutely would pursue.
Good idea. Thank you. The action being asked by staff is that we vote to forward the recommendations made herein to the Board of Supervisors to create a pilot ARA grant program. Are there any other comments or motion to be made? Yes, Kevin.
I have two comments, if I may.
Yes.
Regarding eligibility requirements and the application process. About 10 to 15 years ago, the County Board of Supervisors established Santa Clara County Weed Management Agency, which was a fiscal agent for funding from the state, which dried up, but it was signed by most of the signatories to it were most of the public agencies in Santa Clara County, and was a voluntary cooperative group that focused on invasive weed management within the county. And that group, and our Ag Commissioner, Joe, I think that the meetings continued even without state funding because they were so very important to the different agencies and landowners to coordinate efforts on properties that were side by side. And I'm hopeful that that structure, that organization, and those projects could be considered as an ecosystem service on your examples, whether that be related to soil health or whether it's related to fire hazard mitigation or vegetation management. In regards to the application process, I would just like to ask that consideration be given to properties that are, when it comes to evaluating proposals for projects, if consideration can be given to whether properties are either conserved lands or enrolled lands in Williamson Act, or if they're enrolled in Farmland Security Zone, to kind of make some linkage here, not that, you know, to the exclusion of other properties, but if there's a point system, I could see it being logical and a greater public benefit that infrastructure projects be prioritized to conserved lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Aaron.
Aaron Gill, if I could say thanks, Mike, for a good presentation. It's good. I think we've got some areas to go into in terms of managing the private enterprise public type of interface there, and a lot of things we've been doing in terms of the mobile lab we've been doing since the last drought, before the last drought. So the mobile lab has been around for plus or minus 18 years. It's been very, very helpful for us in terms of using it. We've used it for a number of years, and Marcus Buchanan was really instrumental in making that happen. And we've used water sensing, and we've used drip tape, and we've measured efficiencies and all those types of things. And the one thing I'd kind of bring back to that is it's super important to understand that, but it's also super important to go ahead and understand that you cannot go ahead and sacrifice, on the edge of water efficiency and risk crop loss, crop failure, and complete loss of any revenue that the grower can actually obtain, through these systems. So it's got to be something that's a whole and not just one-sided. So I would, I encourage the process. I think it's good. I think some things like restorative ecology is really good for us to work with in terms of the growers, and hedgerows and those types of things are super important for us to go ahead and make those movements. Also the healthy soils issues. Absolutely. I think that comes with longevity, and I think that comes with the partnership between owners and farmers and growers being able to manage long-term and not short-term. And those are some obstacles that will come up if you do not have that application of being able to extend agriculture within some of these areas. So it would be monies that would be not the best spent if they're turned quickly and rapidly into something else besides production of agricultural products for the quality good of the community. So I'd go those and raise those as issues. I think that the UC Cooperative Extension is actually been a huge partner for the local ag community, and I'd wholeheartedly recommend partnering with them in terms of doing some pilot programs in terms of how best to approach these things, such as water efficiencies, cropping, healthy soils, those types of things. Some of the issues that growers are really facing right now is like Kevin O'Day mentioned, weed encroachment. We've got a lot of things that are coming in, pests, that we do not have tools for because they're being eliminated. And on our side of the fence, it's very difficult to go ahead and not be able to manage things because you do not have the tools, or the tools are being taken away. So there's a little bit of outreach in there that needs to be done in terms of the science of how things happen and how things work. And that'd be nice to have that happen as well as a public outreach, so the community feels more at ease is what we do with our tools. I think it's a great start. I think it's a great start, and I know that the ag community will welcome the conversation and welcome participating in the development of the program. Thank you.
And Aaron, is that a motion that you want to make? Nope. Julie,
Chair
you have some
Washington,
comments?
can I just ask a couple
Of course.
questions? Sorry, thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank Sherry for coming down. I really appreciate having your input. It's really wonderful because I think you answered one of my questions right off the bat. And Dina and Stephanie, thank you very much, especially you, Stephanie. I know this is a tough commute. So sort of following up on what Aaron said, and thank you, Aaron, your comments were fantastic. I was just wanting to know two things. Well, partly a comment. The Department of the Natural Resources Agency just came out with their fourth assessment on climate change. We're expecting, from what they're looking at right now, is Northern California, and I would say it probably comes down to us, we will get more rain, which sounds weird, but it's more because of the heat in terms of, we won't have snow up so much, we'll have more rain than we will have snow, which will not be a good thing. So I think really looking long-term in terms of how we can be capturing that and bringing that down into the aquifer, that's going to be very important, so I like that portion of things. Then on the other side of it, also I think what Aaron was mentioning was longevity in terms of, you said 1 to 5 years, what we'd be looking at to begin with. The longevity of having those things last, and with the monies put in, and then making sure that sort of continues. Have you given thought to this point of what you would like to see in terms of follow-up past to see how long these are implemented? What would you like to see past once the funding is gone?
I think there's room to take into consideration in the ranking process whether there's tenure on that land. If a farmer's on a year-to-year lease, there should be a structure to look less favorably on that. Unfortunate though it may be for the farmer, that to ensure that the benefits last there. So I think that that's one thing. Again, we're looking at both infrastructure improvements as well as annual, or in some cases, very regular practices. So it depends on what you're talking about, but if it's a hedgerow, the contract would be to maintain the hedgerow or to at least not tear it out for the period of that contract. So that's going to be a much easier contract to have over a longer period of time. Whereas cover cropping, that's a lot of work every year, a 5-year contract. You don't necessarily know what's going to be going on with your field 2, 3, 4 years down the line. My hope would be that the benefit of the program is evident enough that a participant enrolling would want to continually enroll. And something that we could look at as well is that at the federal level in the Conservation Stewardship Program, farmers are rewarded additionally. You could think of it kind of the same way that the Farmland Security Zone rewards longer-term participation. The CSP program rewards longer-term participation as well as stacking those benefits. So instead of just saying, I will install this drip irrigation or I will apply cover crop this year, what they'll look at is a comprehensive farm plan and how you're managing natural resources. And so it's possible that we could have both of those, kind of the ad hoc approach for farmers that really can't commit a whole lot, but are interested in implementing conservation practices, as well as those who have longer tenure and those who are more invested in experimenting with more stuff could participate in a longer term program that's more comprehensive. In terms of having any teeth to guarantee, I think that's difficult, and I think that you would lose a lot of participation if you tried to do that.
Thank you. Larry.
Yeah, sorry if I missed some of the answers at the beginning here, but so this is a $200K one-time deal, or is it for several years?
The envisionment was it's a pilot program, $200,000 one-time grant program.
And so would it be divided like $20,000 to 10 farmers, or $200,000 to one farmer, or $200 to 1,000 farmers?
So we're not just going to have a line of farmers that we're handing out dollars to. The idea is that farmers voluntarily enroll in certain practices or, again, for certain infrastructure improvements, and the payment rates are predicated on what practices or infrastructure they select. So let's say that a farmer wants to apply mulch to their orchard in a beneficial way, then we will have a rate of payment for the number of acreage in which they're doing that on. Or let's say they want to have a 200-foot long hedgerow, then they will be paid on the basis of the length of the hedgerow and the length of their maintenance of the hedgerow.
So it's a competitive application then, and you rank the applicants and fund as many as you can then?
That's the idea. And I think part of what we're looking at, again, a county doesn't traditionally do this. While they're good models for this, it's pretty innovative for a county taking this approach. And so I think a big part of the pilot is to understand how best we can leverage the existing programs and how best we can serve the farmers. So I think we're open to how the program is administered, but the idea would be that there's a one-time allocation to figure that out, and that with local sustainable funding source, let's say for the ACE program, that a very tiny sliver of that might be available were this program to be a success.
And these are grants, these are not loans?
Correct.
And you pay the money in advance, or do they do the work and then get reimbursed? I guess there are details to work out.
Yeah.
Having been on a grant once, I'm just curious about these things.
Again, I think that typically reimbursement is what goes on, but
yes,
as I mentioned earlier, we're open to flexibility to work best for the farmers.
And is this for small farmers, or is this large corporations, or is there any limit on it?
There would be no restriction on who could participate. At least, I mean, that is not something out of the gate that we are determining. At this stage, we would like it to be open to as many farmers as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Alex.
Thank you. I really see nothing not to like about this.
Thank you for saying that.
Seriously, other than, for the lack of a better term, the punishment of the people who are thinking ahead. Hopefully there's a way around that in the future. I guess my question is this. Is there a similar program in other counties that are similar to us? I don't mean Merced and Fresno, but that have a similar balance of urban to ag as Santa Clara County, whether it's in this state or other states, and are there any results?
Yeah, I would say absolutely not. There's really no counties at all that are doing this. And the one good example that I can point to that's a different situation, but a good model to investigate in terms of the administration and the cooperative agreement that formed is the example of the Chesapeake Bay area, where you had local governments as well as state governments all within the Chesapeake Bay watershed who saw that cover cropping was a really efficient way of preventing excess nitrogen and phosphorus from going into the bay, which was getting to a really detrimental level. And so they asked farmers why they weren't adopting cover crops, and they said it's too expensive, the risk is too high. And so they created a local trust fund in which they bumped up, with supplement from the federal programs, the states, and in some cases, local governments fed into this trust fund. And in the course of a decade, they went from 5% cover cropped acreage to 75% cover cropped acreage. So they were trying to address a very real problem, but that's the only and the closest analogy in terms of a local government creating a program like this.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to look for a motion for someone to suggest to the Board of Supervisors that the county funds a $200,000 grant program to give to farmers that do these wonderful measures.
I'd like to make such a motion. Aaron Gill.
Second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Laurel, did you have a question? Nope. We're good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Off my microphone. We're now going to move back to item number 6, which is to receive a report from the Ag Task Force Ad Hoc Subcommittee. And you're, I'm assuming, making the report?
We can fill the next hour with a report out.
Not funny, Rob.
I can just start and let committee members chime in. So the subcommittee did get together on August 17th. The focus of the subcommittee was to look at funding strategies overall, a very hard look, given our discussion over 2 meetings on what is feasible, to look at a short-term strategy, both on funding and to have high target short-term acquisitions that we think could kickstart the ACE program. We had a very robust discussion on the 17th. I think we've centered on some ideas for a longer-term strategy. Most of these do involve going onto a ballot and voters, and I think likely the next target is 2020, but we had a good round discussion on what possible incentives or tax incentives or voter-approved incentives that we could look at. Our next step and what we want to look at is in terms of a short-term strategy, looking at what properties in the RO would be best served by going after for ACE acquisitions over the next 2 years. We wanted to talk to the Farm Bureau then. That was part of the marching orders for the subcommittee. We are meeting with the Farm Bureau next Tuesday. I've developed initially some criteria that we wanted the Farm Bureau to look at and then the subcommittee to come back to, but the intent was to get their feedback on what types of properties in the RO of farmland would be the best target for a short-term acquisition strategy. So with that, I'll go ahead and be quiet. If any other subcommittee members wanted to chime in on where we're at, I'd just say overall, I was anticipating that we could target reporting back to this task force by September on our recommendations.
Next week? Next month?
Next week, you scared me. Next month, yes.
Next month, September 27th. All right, before we move on to committee members, anyone in the public wish to speak to item number 6? Seeing none, we'll close that. Any committee members, this is simply receive a report. No voting is necessary, no action is necessary. If there's no other comments, we'll consider this report received. We'll consider it received. We now move on to, let's see, 8 was handled, approval of minutes was handled by consent. That moves us on to item number 9, which is adjournment until September 27th, meeting at 5:30 p.m. in these same chambers. Any other comments to be made by anyone? Nope, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for your time.